What is up, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of The Danny Show. I'm your host, Daniel Cody. And this is where I give commentary and reviews on all things wrestling. Thank you for joining. This evening, we celebrate one of the greatest legends in WWE, WCW, NWA history. I am talking about the limousine riding, jet flying, kid stealing son of a gun, the 16-time world champion, Ric Flair. Woo! The Nature Boy. One of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And today, as a custom on this channel, I have a top 10 in honor of the legendary one, Ric Flair, who will be in Sting's corner, from what I hear, for his last match in AEW. Sting's last match. But let's get into my favorite matches with Ric Flair. Woo! Now, we start at number 10. And this is going to tell you the type of mood I've been in lately. At number 10, we're going to start off with Ric Flair versus Vince Dick. I want to say it so bad just to make fun of the guy, but Vince, never mind. But Vince McMahon at the Royal Rumble 2002 in my former hometown of Atlanta, where Ric Flair currently resides, a street fight between two co-holders of the WWE at the time, Ric Flair and Mr. McMahon, would fight in a street fight because Vince McMahon is a perverted man off screen, but he showed his perverted side on screen where he says, "I like ruining lives. It turns me on." Crazy part about it is that doesn't really age well in a comfortable manner because he has messed up a lot of lives in real life. And I can't really say that's funny. What I am saying is that any good match that involves someone beating the crap out of Mr. McMahon is very satisfying to me because he's just apparently and allegedly such a terrible person, not a terrible person in real life, but a pretty not so decent guy. Which makes this match also satisfying between the two co-owners, and Ric Flair would win the match in front of his kids in Atlanta, and Mr. McMahon would lose his mind saying he wants to inject the WWE with a poison. I would emulate it, but again, because he's done so many terrible things, I can't emulate bad behavior. So I won't do that. But what I will say is, ironically, Mr. McMahon said he wants to inject the WWE with a poison. Vince, you are the poison. But in any event, great street fight at the Royal Rumble and very satisfying to see someone beat up Mr. McMahon. At number 9, we have Randy Orton versus Ric Flair at Taboo Tuesday 2004 in a steel cage match. This was a really good one. Ric Flair had a great showing, drew first blood on Randy Orton. Eventually, both men would become a Crimson Mass. The fact that Randy Orton is able to have children is a miracle, considering that Ric Flair did show he was the dirtiest player in the game in that match, even using brass knucks. But after a failed attempt with the chair, Randy Orton went for the RKO, and unfortunately for Ric Flair, this was a losing effort. However, both men would end up showing great respect to one another, while also Ric Flair would be on Randy Orton's legend defeating list because Randy Orton was growing into being, had already continued growing in his legend killer status. So this was a great, brutal, bloody match, which saw Randy Orton win and both former Evolution allies showing respect. Next, at number 8, we have Ric Flair versus Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 24. It is WrestleMania season, and we have to put a WrestleMania match on this list. One of the greatest Ric Flair matches at WrestleMania would be his last, because in this match, it was stipulated that if Ric Flair lost, he would have to retire. But what a great way to go out against the showstopper, Mr. WrestleMania. However, it would become true of Shawn Michaels to be the Heartbreak Kid. Of course, we had that symbolic, I'm sorry, I love you super kick before Ric Flair would lose the match, forcing him to retire. However, something good came out of that match. A lot of good came out of that match. And for the first time in a long time, the crossbody off the top rope that Ric Flair keeps trying to use but failing to actually worked that time. But nonetheless, one of the most emotional moments in WrestleMania history was Ric Flair's last match, but an amazing match with Shawn Michaels. Next, we have another ally of Shawn Michaels and Evolution member at number 7 is Triple H at Taboo Tuesday 2005. Also, inside a steel cage match. Fun fact, Taboo Tuesday was the night that fans were in charge. And again, fans voted through the options, like 2004, to have a steel cage match. And it was for the Intercontinental Championship because Ric Flair was champion and Triple H wanted, in his mind, to put Old Yeller down, whatever his heelish mindset was. Funny thing, I will say this: Triple H could be a good on screen villain, but he is an off screen good guy. Whether he was villain or hero on screen, unlike certain bosses, he's a pretty good guy off screen. And how he mentored and brought up Batista and Randy Orton and just helped get the next generation in NXT is proven of that. Nonetheless, Triple H, being the on screen villain that he was at the time, would challenge Ric Flair for the IC title in a cage match, and he would brutalize Ric Flair using the cage, even using the cage chain to Triple H's advantage, busting Ric Flair open. And much like 2005, both men would eventually become a Crimson Mass. However, it would take, I think, 3 chair shots to the skull. Man, I miss when WWE could do chair shots. But we got 3 chair shots to Triple H's skull, and Ric Flair would escape the cage, to win the match and retain the Intercontinental Championship. Next, at number 6, we are going way back in time. Way before I was even a thought. This was 11 years before I was ever even born. This was a match between Ric Flair and Harley Race in a steel cage match at the first Starrcade 1983. I was nowhere near around. The same year Michael Jackson did Beat It and Thriller. But this was a pretty rough steel cage match, and this was a match where Ric Flair would win his second of 16 world championships, the NWA championship at the time, and it was a match against Harley Race. And it was a bloody match, but he would win, and he would win using the crossbody. And the only time I've ever seen Ric Flair use the crossbody, as mentioned earlier, was WrestleMania 24. But apparently, because he won with a crossbody that night, he must have thought to himself, you know what, I won with this, let's keep on using it. And to my knowledge, no one he's never used it successfully after that. Even Jerry Law used to say, Rick, stop going to the top. It never worked. But Rick still lived off on the fact that it worked in 1983. And it never worked again, to my knowledge, till 2008. But nonetheless, Ric Flair would win, was congratulated by the fans. Many people came to the ring to celebrate with Ric Flair, including Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and his then wife at the time. Next, at number 5, we have Ric Flair at the 1992 Royal Rumble match, where he would come in at number 3 and go the distance to win the then WWE Championship that was vacated and go on to WrestleMania. Also, with a tear in his eye, it was one of the greatest moments of his life. He survived The Undertaker, Psycho Sid, Hulk Hogan, Jake the Snake, Randy Savage, who had their own issues at the time, but he survived all of them to win the match. Even though he was heel at the time, he survived all of them. And the only other two people that I knew to win from the number three spot, to my knowledge, were all women, being Bianca in 2021 and Bailey earlier this year. At number four, we have Ric Flair versus Vader at Starcade, many a decade or so later. This time, Ric Flair would have his a championship match against Vader, who was accompanied by a very bitter Harley Race. As mentioned early at the first Starcade, Ric Flair defeated Harley Race to win his second NWA and altogether second World Heavyweight Championship. But this time, Ric Flair had to overcome outside interference of Harley Race and the gigantic big man Vader. And of course, this was also won, even though Ric Flair was a little bit bloody. Sorry, I'm thinking about the other match. In this particular match, Ric Flair, like I said, survived two men. It was almost a handicap match, but he survived them all. Harley Race tried to do a diving headbutt onto Ric Flair, but missed, accidentally taking on Vader. And of course, this would be the night where Ric Flair would defend his career and become an 11-time altogether W World Heavyweight Champion, as he won then the WCW World Heavyweight Champion from Vader. And of course, Harley Race still bitter because a decade ago he got his butt kicked by Ric Flair. At number three, we have Sting versus Ric Flair at Clash of Champions 1988. This match went 45 minutes, and even though there was not a clear winner, this still was a very excellent match. This took place again at Clash of Champions 1988, and if you have not seen it, be sure to check it out. It was great. Ric Flair, we saw both guys use their best submission holds. We saw Ric Flair try to chop down Sting with his chest chops. Sting acted very numb to a lot of things in that match because no matter how many times he got slapped in the chest or punched in the face, Sting just acted numb to everything. And ironically, if you pay close attention, you'll notice that the top AEW commentators of today, Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone, were the two calling that exact match many years ago. And now we are coming up on AEW Revolution, where Sting will team against Darby Allin against the Young Bucks. And I believe Ric Flair will be in support of them. But man, how everything has come full circle. And even though it went to a draw and Ric Flair retained his championship, it was still a great match. At number two, we got a 5-star on our hands. We have Ric Flair versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat at Wrestle War 1989 for the WCW World Heavyweight Champion. I want to point out something. Notice last month, as we were celebrating Royal Rumble season, gearing up for the Royal Rumble, I watched NXT TakeOver San Antonio just before Royal Rumble 2017. as we were just gearing up through all the great January events in WWE's history. And I noticed that Robert Roode came to the ring, the glorious Bobby Roode, who has been cleared, by the way, came to the ring with a whole bunch of women, all in blue dresses, as Roode was in a blue robe. This was symbolic paying tribute to Ric Flair, who originated this entrance at Wrestle War 1989, as he came to the ring accompanied by many women, just as Rick Rude wasn't, not Robert or Bobby Roode was inspired to do in 2017. Rick did it first in 1989, going in to have a tremendous match with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And while the past three matches they had were all 5 and 6 star classics, this would be the one where Ric Flair would actually get the victory and regain the championship from the man who actually took it from him. And he would win this match and also start another war. This time he would start a war with the late Terry Funk. That brings us to our top match on this list. Before I get into the top number one match, I would like to give an honorable mention to one of my all-time favorites, The Undertaker, WrestleMania 18, amongst some others. But at number one, we have Ric Flair versus Terry Funk in an I Quit match. This took place at Clash of Champions, I believe that same year afterwards. And this would be a match where Ric Flair sent Terry Funk sliding through a table. Before I go any further, God rest the soul of the late, great Terry Funk, still miss. But this was an interesting one as well. Ric Flair is, fun fact, Ric Flair, to my knowledge, seems like a pretty good master of the I Quit match as well, because he would win this match, but he was also a master of the I Quit match with Mick Foley at SummerSlam 2006. So Ric Flair's not big on quitting either, much like John Cena. However, this match, we saw chops going off, and in the end, Ric Flair with the figure four would make the late great Terry Funk say, "I quit." And as promised, Terry Funk shook the hand of Ric Flair. Unfortunately, Terry Funk's manager had a couple of friends come out to attack Terry and Ric Flair. Thankfully, Sting came out, but for some strange reason, Lex Luger went heel on his best friend. But the Great Muta, who was a part of the attack towards Ric Flair, would get his eventually. So, that's my top 10 for now on my favorite Ric Flair matches. Let me know in the comment section below, what was your favorite match from the legendary 16-time champion, Ric Flair. I'm your host, Daniel Cody. That's all the time I have for you today, and I'll be back with another review on all things wrestling. Peace out. Woo!